welcome to ESPN FC Live with myself, Alexis Nunes, alongside my boy, my brother from another mother, Shaka Hislop, is joining me. Plenty to talk about because we are winding down the business end, I suppose, of the season. Footballers everywhere are planning their holidays, but some still have business to take care of. On that note, Shaka, what was your favorite holiday as a footballer when the world is your oyster?
We only had one holiday, off season. That's it.
But where did you go? Maldives,
We went to Trinidad. My wife and I, it's the only time we had built-in babysitters when we went back to Trinidad and we had friends and family around and we could get a moment away from the kids. So that was pretty straightforward for us.
I love that. I always get excited thinking of where footballers go on their fancy holidays. But anyways, as we said, some of the leagues have been taken care of, like the Bundesliga and La Liga. But the Premier League is going down to the wire to the very last day. Mad props to Man City and Arsenal for keeping us on our toes. Last night, though, Tottenham had a massive chance to at least make things interesting, Shaka. I know you can't rely on Tottenham to do their North London rivals Arsenal a favor in a title race, but at least it would have helped them to put out a stronger showing against Manchester City at home, especially considering they were trying to chase down Aston Villa for that last Champions League spot. But in the end, Manchester City, like the well-oiled Catalan-driven machine that they are, they got the win 2-0, 2 goals from Erling Haaland. Let's talk about that game. Just your overall thoughts, Shaka, on it, because it wasn't a clear-cut, easy, nice, smooth Manchester City win as we've come to know. They were made to work, and it was a bit cautious, kind of like Arsenal against Manchester United last weekend.
I think everything about the season kind of hinged on that game last night. And while you say Spurs had an opportunity to keep it interesting, had Spurs picked up points and they would have handed certainly pole position to Arsenal, who I don't see dropping points on the last day of the season. So not just hand pole position, but effectively hand the title to Arsenal. Similarly, it was if Man City won and Spurs obviously didn't pick anything up from it, I think again, effectively, it hands the title to Manchester City. So it was the stakes were extremely high in terms of the title and where it ends up. And I think you saw some of that probably for the first time from Manchester City, a team that knows how to handle this part of the season as well as anybody ever has. Squeaky bum time, as Alex Ferguson phrased it, and Pep Guardiola kind of echoed those sentiments. But this is when City are normally at their best, and I thought they were anything but. But for combination and depending on which side of the fence you sit, poor finishing from Son or just good goalkeeping, and with the latter, we could be having a very different discussion today, Alexis.
I was going to say, it's rare that we have to talk so much about the goalkeeping at the end of a match, but you're the perfect person to do that. I know the boys on the show spoke about it, and Frank was saying if he had to give a player of the match, it would actually go to Pep Guardiola, because massive call to bring off Ederson in what was an important game, even though we knew it was going down to the wire on the last day of the season, and to put on Stefan Ortega, who definitely raised his stock even more.
Well, I don't think Ederson looked himself after that collision with Romero. So whether it was Pep Guardiola making that decision unilaterally or Ederson after the collision, and I know he stayed on for a couple of minutes, but I've been there. You're in a heavy collision, you kind of think that you will shake it off, but it just doesn't happen, and you just have to do what's the responsible thing and put your hand up and ask to come off. Just say you aren't yourself. Credit to Ortega as much as anyone. I've also come off the bench on occasion in games, and that is not an easy thing to do for a goalkeeper. It's not something that you expect to do or conditioned to do. So Ortega comes off the bench and plays a huge role in the eventual outcome of this game. So I think fullest of credit absolutely goes to him. But then, yes, you do have to give Pep Guardiola credit for at least keeping City's players' heads on their shoulders. They eventually get the job done, but it could have been so different. And I think a lesser team with maybe a lesser manager maybe fall under the pressure, because for all the complaints about Spurs, particularly over recent weeks, and unable to really put together the performances and results that we saw from early in the season. Spurs again showed, albeit in a losing effort, how good a team they truly are.
Yeah, let's stick a pin there because before we start talking about the permutations for the final day, and of course we're going to continue talking about Manchester City, but let's stick a pin in Spurs as well because Ange Postecoglou had some interesting comments afterward where he says that that match pretty much showed him that Spurs have some serious cracks in their foundation, both inside the club and outside. Just, a couple of months ago, we were all buying into and falling in love with Ange Ball and the way Spurs were going and really feeling that this would have been a special time for them. And here they are now, still not even getting Champions League football, which is kind of a figurative trophy in and of itself. Just look at how Aston Villa celebrated it last night when it became official. So just thoughts overall on Spurs and what was going so right and then ultimately, I suppose, ended up so wrong, according to Ange.
Listen, I love everything about Ange Postecoglou and what he's done with Spurs. And while I understand exactly what he's saying, when you're at a club like Tottenham Hotspur, finishing fourth, while yes, it delivers Champions League football and it may seem like an accomplishment, you have to set your bar a whole lot higher. And I don't say that to take anything away from Aston Villa, who welcomed Champions League football to Villa Park, I think for the first time in 41 years or something of the sort. So give them their credit because they earned their fourth spot, they earned Champions League football. But I think the point that Andrew's making is we set our sights a whole lot higher than just that. If we miss on winning the title and we finish in the top four, so be it. But we aren't focused on finishing in the top four. And I think when he talks about the cracks within the club, again, here you have an opportunity to win a football game and all the discussion leading up to it, including from Spurs fans, is about whether you prefer Spurs to lose a game. And again, I think that ties into Ange's own kind of sentiment around who they are and where their targets need to be. The target, Spurs aren't a club whose only target is to deny Arsenal. That's the message I think he's trying to send. They're there to win things, win football games, and then go on to win titles. Nothing comes in the way of that, not even in this instance, denying Arsenal. So I fully agree with Ange Postecoglou. And the way he's kind of set his stall out and who he expects Spurs to be.
Love me some Ange. And I suppose on that question, he probably is having these discussions now, and we should as well. What more is it going to take then for Spurs to get there, to get that little hint of silverware? Because we did see them reach a high in terms of reaching the Champions League final under Mauricio Pochettino, who we knew is pretty much like a legend at Spurs. But again, still nothing. We see Ange again getting the fans alive and in love with the style of football they're playing. They have produced, in the absence of Harry Kane, still some brilliant football as well. Sonny is Sonny. I don't even need to talk about what special talent he is. So what more is it going to take for Spurs then to at least get something?
Well, you touched on there, Alexis. After you lose Harry Kane, you've got to replace him. And granted, it's difficult to replace somebody like Harry Kane and what he's meant over the years to that football club. But you need an out-and-out striker. And while Heung-min Son has been an outstanding stand-in in that regard, far better than I expected, I still think his strengths comes in the wide areas. His strengths comes in those partnerships that you saw him strike up with Harry Kane. So if you can get and that out-and-out goal scorer, and I know there aren't many around, but if you can find that goal scorer to deliver somewhat in the way that Harry Kane did, I think you go a long way in addressing some of the deficiencies. That and just squad depth, which I think cost Spurs. Spurs had a lot of injuries during the course of this season, and it took away from who they were. Postecoglou was determined that even with those injuries, that he wasn't going to change his style. He wasn't going to change who they were, or certainly who he was trying to make them to be. Now, that may have cost him in that regard, in terms of individual games and points dropped, but he's kind of unwavering in his commitment to this type of football and who Spurs will be. And I think he's proven himself as a manager during the course of this season. Let's be honest, while it feels very disappointing for Spurs to finish fifth, as it looks like right now, given how the season went, come beginning of August, and once Harry Kane moves to German football, I didn't think Spurs would come anywhere close to that top six, top eight. So for them to be in a battle or being discussed as possible top in the table at one point, albeit early in the season, and now later on in finishing top four, I think it's success in itself. That's me looking in from the outside. Don't tell Ange Postecoglou I said that. But I made that point just to say that I think Daniel Levy and Spurs owners have to back him now in the transfer window in delivering the types of players and the number of players that he needs.
Yeah, long live Ange at Spurs. I definitely do love me some Ange Postecoglou. Very, very refreshing. And while Spurs may feel like now their season's pretty much done, even though they have one more to play, it still is not officially decided that at the top of the Premier League table, like we keep saying, it is gone down to the wire. This Sunday, who will it be? Arsenal or Manchester City? Of course, City firmly in the driver's seat, I would say, because knowing what we know of Manchester City, it's hard to see them mess things up right now. So Arsenal, all they can do is get the job done against Everton, which normally, Shaka, would be a tricky fixture. Mikel Arteta, of course, knows Everton very, very well. Everton under Sean Dyche is definitely a force. They've flirted with danger in the last 2 seasons, but somehow they managed to pull it off. Some may say, at least now that they're safe, they may not have as much to fight for in this one. But how do you see this one going? Could this be a banana peel for the Gunners?
Short answer to that is no. Listen, I totally understand. You kind of know what you're getting from a Sean Dyche team. But when you're down near the bottom for most of the season, as Everton have, granted the points deduction played a huge part in that, and then all of a sudden now you find yourself out of danger. No, you're not going down. It's really easy just to kind of put the season behind you. You know, you start well, but 20 minutes in, you just think, oh, just blow it off, ref. Let's let them have it. We've had enough of this pressure down the bottom of the table. We just want to put this season behind us and look forward to next season. So expect a strong start from Everton, but I expect that to kind of fizzle early on. That being said, at the best of times, Arsenal against Everton, you'd back Arsenal, certainly this version of Arsenal, 99 times out of 100. They really have been that good. So I expect Arsenal to get the job done, which is all they can do, while keeping one eye on what's happening in Northwest up at the Etihad, and just hope for a minor miracle, mind you, coming from West Ham, albeit a West Ham on the road. But we know that David Moyes can set West Ham up to be a little bit pragmatic, shall we say. Between that pragmatism and any nerves from Manchester City, some of which we probably saw at Spurs, who knows what twist the final day of the season may yet have.
Just also sticking on Arsenal, because you talk about how it's so rare to see nerves getting to Manchester City. So you'd expect it to still get to Arsenal, even though they've shown how much they've grown mentally this season under Mikel Arteta. But, you know, it's also a good thing. It's almost like a blessing and a curse to have this last fixture at home, because then you have the pressure of what's going on, focusing on what's going on in Manchester as well. And then doing that in the presence of 60,000+ fans who will literally be holding their breaths come Sunday, Shaka. So Arsenal, this is going to be a huge mental game for them too, even though it looks like they've already won on paper.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and everything hinges on what's happening in Manchester, and of course that information will be flowing quite freely, quite openly, and players will be aware of what's happening in real time, at the very least from fan reaction. I've been there. May 1996, final game of the season, Newcastle. We were at home to Spurs, and Manchester United, who just gone top of us in the table, were away to Middlesbrough. We had to win and hope that Middlesbrough got something. The difference that day was that Manchester United, away to Middlesbrough, took the lead very early on. It might have been 2 or 3 even before half time, and that kind of knocked any wind out of our sails. In the end, Newcastle drew, so it was a 4-point difference. But if we had to win, there was no question in my mind that we would have. But that information gets to you on the park in real time, and this was pre-internet. We had cell phones, but it wasn't that great. But even then, you knew exactly what was happening at Middlesbrough, and you expect the exact same to be happening with Arsenal. Now, if all of a sudden you get to halftime an hour and West Ham are still level with Manchester City, there's a sense of belief, if not expectation, that kind of grows around Arsenal and their game. But I expect them to start brightly, get a lead, hold on to that, and just hope for good news from elsewhere.
Shaka, is those a time when you used to have the cell phones that were like as big as this?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much walk around with you had to have a little briefcase with you.
Exactly.
Your cell phone. Yep.
Stop it. Nope. Shaka's not that old. Shaka is not that old. But let's talk about your other boys. West Ham now, because what an up and down season it is. A bit of an emotional ending as well too, with David Moyes leaving, and some would agree that maybe it was time, but of course what he's done for West Ham in the last couple of years has been special in getting them some silverware. But they've got quite the impossible task against Manchester City at home, and Moyes knows it. He did say it would be difficult to even stop Manchester City's under 14s from winning a title, which probably not what you want to hear from your manager. But Shaka, any chance you can make for West Ham, another London rival of Arsenal, to probably do them more of a favor than Spurs did?
Yeah, well, listen, there's again, truth be told, Manchester City against West Ham, City win 99 times out of 100. If I'm trying to make an argument for West Ham have this, but I want to say a little bit of a history or some experience. West Ham had this fascination with denying teams, and as a Manchester United fan, you remember, Alexis, only too well on final days of the season. But that was back in the Upton Park days, just a little bit after the cell phone in a briefcase days. I'm not sure if that still holds. And again, that was West Ham at home at Upton Park. Now all of a sudden you're going up to Etihad. That task is all the more difficult. But as you said, we know that David Moyes can set West Ham up to be pragmatic, to be negative. That's probably why David Moyes is moving on. I'll touch on that in a little bit in a while. That's probably why David Moyes is moving on, and maybe just doing that and just denying Manchester City, because while you accept that somebody at some point may be celebrating kind of a victory, a title-winning victory while you're in the park, you also have some kind of professional pride in denying them that opportunity to celebrate. You like being party poopers, but again, it's Manchester City, so all things being even, Manchester City should win. And I will also say, in credit to David Moyes, and while yes, he's had his critics, I've been one at times. I'm sitting around the pragmatism around West Ham football, and West Ham pride themselves in the Ron Greenwood style. They aren't ones their fans don't really celebrate kind of negative football. They want to see teams go out and play and are happy for that, even if at times it means in a losing effort. You have to give David Moyes credit, not once but twice. Whenever this club was in trouble, David Moyes came to its saving, either to get them promoted or to steer them away from relegation. So and put them back on this steady ground. So while again David Moyes has his critics, he also has his fans, and with very good reason, because when the moment needed the man, David Moyes proved himself to be exactly that.
Well, we have some hot takes to get to, which we will in just a bit before we wrap things up in terms of the Premier League title race. But just sparing a moment for City. And like I said, it probably will be their biggest moment now. They're chasing their 6th Premier League title in 7 seasons. Only Jurgen Klopp, was able to stop them. And that was just once, that now everyone's looking at Jurgen Klopp's legacy and wondering, is it as glittering as it seems to be, because again, only able to stop City once in those 7 seasons, but they are building quite I want to say scary legacy, Shaka. And of course, a lot of it is on Pep Guardiola, because we know the brilliant manager that he is. What has he not won? But this legacy of Manchester City, it's going to be hard to topple, at least in the current and near future, for any club looking at them now.
Absolutely. But the only thing that kind of damages or stops this legacy, to use your phrasing, Alexis, is these financial stipulations, the investigations that continue to be ongoing, and
Yeah.
right now it's kind of dragged on to the point where it really is taking away from what we see and how we feel about Manchester City, because you have Everton have now had points deducted twice during the course of one season. Nottingham Forest have had points deducted. The fines were, or the investigations were announced around Manchester City's finances over 12 months ago, and still nothing, no kind of resolution in sight. And yes, I get it. It's a different type of circumstance and different charges. All that is semantics, while this kind of drags on for as long as it has, and Manchester City continues to build the legacy that they have over the last 7 years, but you could probably say it was even longer in the building. That being said, points deduction aside, if we can, it's almost impossible to put into any kind of perspective what we've seen from Manchester City over the last 7 years. 6 titles in 7 years. The one title they didn't win, I think they trailed Liverpool by a point, albeit they won at least one of those. Manchester City won at least one of those by a point themselves. But consistently, their points tally has been as high as any in the Premier League. It really has been incredible to witness how they've been able to do that, and do that consistently. In terms of all good things, I guess, all legacies come to an end at some point. And Mikel Arteta, who of course was once Pep Guardiola's number 2, is building quite a team down in the red part of North London. When you look at Arsenal, look at their youth, and maybe what that promises in the long term, maybe we'll see an unseating of Manchester City at the very top. But put nothing apart City, put nothing apart Guardiola. They've been able to continue to refresh time and time again, and are always there or thereabouts. So even as Arsenal and whoever else threatens to build a team to knock them off their perch, they have a way of renewing. So right now, as I said, the only thing that maybe can stop Manchester City is Manchester City and how they've managed their finances in the past.
And also certain Carlo Ancelotti and Real Madrid. But that's a story for another day.
That's Europe. That's for Europe.
Europe, yeah.
Domestically, 6 titles, and say, surely, actually, they're not gonna play in the Premier League anytime soon. Real Madrid.
No, those two almost need a Super League for themselves, just to battle it out week in, week out. Because isn't it interesting? All right, let's move on to some hot takes now. And before anybody gets their laundry in a twist, these are some hot takes that are taken from already done discussions on social media, where we go for any sorts of facts we need, right, Shaka? But I just want your opinion on them, because you know what? At least these open further discussions. So first one now, Bayer Leverkusen. This one's been floating around a lot. So Bayer Leverkusen, we know this historic season that they're still having, already wrapped up the Bundesliga, 33 matches so far, 6 draws, not 1 loss, 50 unbeaten in all competitions as well. Is their run now under Xabi more impressive than the Arsenal Invincibles era?
Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Listen, Bayer Leverkusen have got 3 games left in the season, and for all intents and purposes, we can call them three finals. Yes, they've already won the Bundesliga, but they've got 1 league game to go the entire campaign undefeated. Albeit there are less league games in Germany than there are in England. They've got the Europa League final, and they've got the Pokal final. So you go 53. There's a possibility of going 53 games unbeaten, winning 3 trophies. Listen, as much as I appreciate what the Invincibles did back in, what was that, 2004. This is nowhere close. Or that is nowhere close, in
Yeah.
my opinion, to what Leverkusen have been able to do both domestically and in Europe. Okay, it's not the Champions League; it's one step below. But take nothing away from them, and the run they've also been able to put together in the cup. I think it's all the more impressive when you consider exactly where Leverkusen were when Xabi Alonso took them over in October of
Mm.
what was that, 2022. I mean, they were. Um, he came in for a reason, because Leverkusen were just far too close to the bottom three, and all of a sudden finished in the European places and put together a season like one we've never seen before.
Absolutely stunning indeed. I agree with you 100% on that one. And still sticking with Leverkusen, because we know Xavi is still such a young manager making his way, and he has been doing very well. Now everybody wants him, including ties back to Liverpool and to Real Madrid. We know now that's not going to happen, at least for now, at least for next season, because he says that he's going to stay on at Bayer Leverkusen. But is he making a mistake? A lot of people seem to think he's making a mistake, that when these big opportunities come calling, you should go. What do you think?
Listen, I totally understand that sentiment, that it's not often Real Madrid and Liverpool and Bayern Munich come calling, let alone all at the same time. And you just wonder if those opportunities will be missed if he doesn't take one right now. But Xabi Alonso, as a player, as a man, we've kind of learned not to question him.
Yeah.
And he just oozes class in everything he has done as a player and as a manager. So while you could question his decision not to go to one of those big clubs, you can't doubt his decision, and that he made it in trusting his own instincts, in trusting that it was right to stay on at Leverkusen for another season, to experience Champions League football, to continue to grow as a manager. Because while this season has been absolutely incredible, like nothing we've seen before, as we've discussed, he probably thinks he's still growing as a manager. How do you deal with setbacks? How do you deal with injury crises? And the one thing that Leverkusen will give him is a whole lot of wiggle room to get things wrong if that's what happens. So he continues to grow as a manager, and I think you've also seen that in terms of the players and their signing on. Florian Wirtz, who was linked with similarly every single big club under the planet. And let's be honest, your time as a player is far shorter potentially than your time as a manager. But Florian Wirtz has said, I'm staying. Xavi's saying, I'm staying. I think the knock-on effect of Xabi Alonso staying on, we can't underscore.
Well, someone who's not staying where they're from, Kylian Mbappe, we know is probably the worst kept secret ever that he is.
West Ham. He's going. Is that what you're going to say? Is that what it is?
We already know he's taking a pay cut, Shaka, to go to Real Madrid. I don't know if he's going to take that much of a pay cut to go to East London, but we shall see. So when he does get to Real Madrid, now that the feeling is that he will score more than 25 goals in his first La Liga season. Now, we have seen people like Jude Bellingham absolutely hit the ground running. Kylian Mbappe, more seasoned player. This is a generational talent, people will argue. So 25 plus goals for a season?
Yeah, I can see that. No question. I mean, the big question about Kylian Mbappe going to Real Madrid is where does he play? Because both he and Vinicius Jr. like to play on the left-hand side. I think Carlo Ancelotti figures that out in much the same way that he figured out Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo this season. Who thought we'd be talking about that front pairing as being well, I don't want to say the best in Europe, but potentially Champions League winners. Carlo Ancelotti has figured out what works for Real Madrid, and I think he'll do exactly the same. I will say that while Vinicius has kind of established himself during the course of this season as the best player on the planet during the course of this season, I still think that Kylian Mbappe is a more natural finisher than Vinicius Jr. So I think 25 goals is without question we're within reach for Kylian Mbappe.
All right, well, let's take the final hot take, and it's been so long since we've spoken about Man United, Shaka. So let's fling out a Man United one, right? Because they get everybody talking, good or bad. Here's one now that will probably get you thinking a little bit. Man United have not signed more than 5 successful players post Sir Alex Ferguson. Now, we've definitely dissected the fact that probably Manchester United's biggest problem in the last decade or so since Sir Alex Ferguson left was, I suppose, bad business in the transfer window. So, have they not signed more than 5 players who you could deem successful?
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of 5 successful players at Manchester United over that period. I really am. You could probably throw out Bruno Fernandes, but then there'll be people who think otherwise. The others, the success stories. Marcus Rashford is an academy product. Kobe Minu is an academy product. I'm going to say no. I mean, that's absolutely true that Manchester United simply haven't. But then here's the other side to that very coin. Jadon Sancho is well, we know that he wasn't a success for Manchester United, but I don't think anybody right now, especially after what we've seen during the course of this season for Dortmund, or during back half of this season, nobody, I think, argues that he's not a good player.
Yeah,
we saw that in Dortmund's run, and we may yet be talking about Jadon Sancho as a Champions League winner. Yet, for Manchester United, a team that may yet finish 8th in the Premier League, it wasn't good enough. How make that math work?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how you break that down.
And I mean, you look at it too, because I know our colleague Mark Ogden recently did an article as well, just kind of ranking some of the signings. And you talk about players like Cristiano Ronaldo that ended horribly. Zlatan, I mean, I know injuries also had a little bit to do there too. You think of Alexis Sanchez, who I was so excited to get his jersey, that obviously did not work out. Cavani, who left and probably didn't. Look at even now.
All good players, by the way. All world-class players, by the way.
Rafael Varane now, too, who is leaving. And you're just almost like, I want to be sad for this because we know the caliber of player. He's only 31 years old. But again, it's not the Real Madrid version of Varane. You talk about Angel Di Maria, Jadon Sancho, as you just mentioned, Daley Blind, etc. Players who United was almost a springboard for them to go elsewhere and get success.
Yeah, Daley Blind, by the way, who's half of a centre-back pairing for Girona, who may yet finish second in Spain. How, again, make the math for me, please. And here's the thing, all incredible players, and the only conclusion you can draw from that is that there's something wrong deeper down with Manchester United. You and I spoke on the weekend, Alexis, after United's game, and the leaking roof we just thought would just summed up Manchester United so wonderfully well. Everything about it, about how the club has been run under the Glazers. Now, maybe Sir Jim Radcliffe comes in and changes that. Maybe Sir Jim Radcliffe himself can patch the roof, so to speak. But we'll see. Again, you don't bring in that kind of talent, and everybody kind of fails so spectacularly without there being a deeper underlying issue.
Well, with that said, I just want to squeeze in one more hot take as well, because it kind of is related to Manchester United, because it has to do with Chelsea. You know, I think United fans and Chelsea fans, especially this season, have loosely, I'll say this phrase loosely, but kind of been brothers in arms, because there's a lot of dysfunctional behavior going on both parts. But look at it now, and Chelsea are at least finishing the season as strongly as they can. Chelsea also have been accused of splashing money and not getting the results they've wanted, not doing very good business in the transfer window as well. But now the hot take is that Chelsea are, how they are now looking at the two clubs, more poised for success, at least in the near future, than United are.
Absolutely. And I think both Chelsea and Manchester United have issues in terms of profit and sustainability, in terms of moving players on. If a buying club and interested in a player from either Chelsea or Manchester United, I'm not sure I'm going to pay them the kind of money that they're looking for. Who are these sellable assets at either of those clubs? Gallagher at Chelsea. I know Bruno Fernandes was linked with Bayern Munich, but outside of that, is there really a lot of assets, player assets, who will bring in the kind of money that both those clubs need to at least satisfy their own financial regulations? I'm not sure that they do. So now, if we're trying to make a judgment call on who's at the club right now and kind of freely assume that there's not going to be an awful lot of business done in the summer, yeah, Chelsea in a far better position. The squad is well, I want to say younger, but certainly they've got players signed on to longer contracts. That may be an issue. But just in terms of the way they finished the season, and if you're asking them to carry that momentum into next, there's easily only one club that stands above the other in that scenario.
It's just one giant headache, doesn't it? But I suppose the best part
was the roof. Let's start with fixing the roof, Alexis.
Oh, Shaka!
Let's just get a plumber in. Let's get a roof in. Let's fix the roof. And then we figure out the rest.
What you can do against Mother Nature when it always rains in Manchester.
So you know you have to get a good roof. You can't just...
Do you know what? I'm actually of the old school belief that I prefer Old Trafford and Stamford Bridge kind of how they are. I feel like they have character. Now all the other stadiums could just be like any fancy NFL stadium.
The roof, Alexa. Stop telling me about character and rain.
Like I'm trying to find
That's not hard. Patch the roof. You can keep the character and old world charm with a roof that's not made of cardboard.
As Shaka says, the maths is not mathing. The maths is not mathing. Which, if anybody grew up in the Caribbean that's watching like Shaka and myself, and you had to do CXC exams in fifth form, I got a 4. And for those in these states that are wondering what that is, that's a big fat fail. So I can't maths any maths, Shaka, but I will call up Jim Radcliffe and find out how the maths is. Anyways, thanks as always to my boy Shaka. Thanks to everyone for tuning into this edition of ESPN FC Live. We will see you again on Friday ahead of what's supposed to be a very exciting weekend in the Premier League. See you then.